we can just go. It's on Twitch and YouTube. I decided to make it on YouTube too, so that's a lot easier for everybody involved. So now I just have to see. Sweet, we are live. All right, you wanted me to send it to Xtina?
Sure.
She better come on. If she doesn't come on, I'm going to be pretty disappointed.
We'll see.
I'll send it to her. Who else did I send it to?
She said she might pop in and out. I don't know. I guess just like Justin and Nick and Jeremy. The usual.
The crew. The gang.
Crew. Who else?
The gang. Good stuff. All right. I sent it to them. I guess we can put it on the internet in some capacity too. Tell me more about your dog while I figure this out. What's his favorite color?
I would have to imagine probably violet. If I had to guess.
That's a random ass guess. Why violet?
I have no idea. He just seems like a violet kind of dog. Maybe indigo. I don't know. He's kind of down like the Biv end of the Roy G. Biv, so we'll see.
Nice. I like that. We will see, I guess. We will see.
He's young. His taste can change.
Yeah, right. He's got some time. We won't pigeonhole him into anything. But I think we got one person. I really hope it's Christina. Oh man, I really hope it's Christina. But thank you everybody. This is the For the Love of Sports NFL draft breakdown. We are doing the other Americas division, the NFC East, because they are always on prime time. I have my buddy Derek Rampulla with me. Derek, how are you today?
Good, man. How you doing?
I am fantastic, and I appreciate you hanging out with me. As everybody out there, I'm sure, is listening, they heard Derek's incredible breakdown of the draft with Justin. We did that right before, about a week before the draft, and it was an absolute blast. And so hopefully we can get a little bit of a breakdown, and I think it'd be fun. And so yeah, I mean, we already did one of these. We did one with Justin last night, and we'll be pretty much doing one a night through all the divisions, and hopefully we can get through them. So as I said, Derek, he's a big Giants fan, just like I am. So you're going to be seeing him again in the future as well with the AFC North. But right now we're going to be hanging out with the NFC East. So Derek, let's just get into it. Just a little bit of a recap. I mean, we have the Redskins, who were top 2. They were the second overall pick. The Giants, the 4th overall pick. The Cowboys, 17th, I think, overall. And the Eagles right around 21st overall. Eagles are the only team that made the playoffs out of the group. So let's go in worst to first order. Let's start with the Washington Redskins. So, as I said, second worst team in the NFL. They got a new coach, Ron Rivera, released Josh Norman, and Jordan Reed honestly did not realize he was still on the. I mean, he hasn't done anything in a while, but they did sign Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby, and they traded for Kyle Allen. And I added that as a specific note. But what did you think their needs were going into the draft?
I think the needs for them were definitely to go in and try and get more help for Dwayne Haskins. He struggled a bit last year, but he showed some more progress towards the end of the year. And we touched on this in the mock draft when we did. You have to go into next year believing that Haskins is your franchise quarterback. So to do that, you have to give him protection up front, and you have to give him some more wide receivers. So I think they kind of touched on that a bit. Mostly with their third round or fourth round pick, the tackle from LSU that they picked up, I thought was a good one immediately after trading Trent Williams. So I don't know if that's almost like a 1 step forward, 2 step back move, but
yeah, that one is it's really interesting to me. Obviously, Trent Williams was not going to stay there. He made that very clear by sitting out all of last year.
Right.
And I think they were kind of hoping that if they brought Ron Rivera in, a respectable name in the business, someone that's been around a little while, went to a Super Bowl recently, that they could change him. And I guess they could not. So they looked for while the whole time it sounded like they were looking for a first round pick. I think they ended up with like a 4th or a 5th, and then a 3rd next year. So something, I guess. But honestly, especially because first round pick was getting thrown around for so long, I don't think they did that great in terms of that trade.
I definitely think that they ended up settling and really trading. I mean, he did kill a lot of his trade value by kind of saying that, look, there's no way I'm coming back to this franchise. But I still think that there could have been a team that might have been desperate enough to give up like a 2nd round pick for him or something.
You'd think so, especially someone like the Bucks, right?
Yeah. I thought that was something to really look out for on Thursday night was, they might trade and trade that away, say screw it, but I guess they thought worse would end up being better.
I guess we will see. That's going to be a fun breakdown there. So in terms of the draft, as you said, they needed Chase Young 2nd overall. I mean, clearly he was the best player in the draft amongst
Yeah,
many, many people.
right.
I know you did want to see them, or relatively thought they should go left tackle with that first position with all of them on the board. But could you really
Hmm.
blame him for taking Chase Young?
No, not at all. I mean, he's clearly the best player. It probably was the smartest pick. I think that if they wanted to take a tackle, they should have traded back, but it seems like both the Dolphins and the Chargers were totally fine staying where they were and just letting those two, Tua and Justin Herbert, fall to them. So they probably didn't really have any kind of good offer to trade back, and so they took Chase Young, who's the best player. He really is an elite talent who can kind of impact a defense like Von Miller, J.J. Watt. So honestly, it just ended up being the easiest choice for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing, as you said, if they could have traded back, I'm sure they were looking for an absolute haul, but I guess
Hmm.
it never came. And it was very weird to me. I think we'll talk a little bit more about this with the Giants pick, that neither the Dolphins or the Chargers traded up. I think it almost
Right.
seemed like they were both content with whoever was their quarterback.
Yeah,
Like,
I
so
think that's
clearly
true.
they were kind of they had them, I guess, rated close enough that it wasn't worth
Hmm.
anything else. So in the second round, the Redskins selected Antonio Gibson, wide receiver / running back out of Memphis. No, I apologize. This was the third round, their
Hmm.
second pick.
Yeah.
I don't know much about Memphis. I know they score a lot of points, and that's about it.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about this guy?
He played the running back position. I think when he actually got drafted, they announced him as a wide receiver. He was kind of used as more as a running back or in an H back role, taking the ball on like jet sweeps, all kinds of weird, like not gimmicky, but just
Hmm.
unconventional offense that you see in the NFL. So I wasn't a big fan of this pick. I think that they really need to go true wide receiver, and there were definitely some options on the board when they picked him. He's more of a guy that like you give like gadget plays to. I mean, I think he can probably play in the slot, but there are a couple of other guys that I think would have been more valuable. Because even if he plays running back, he's going to be buried behind Adrian Peterson and Darius Geis. So,
Hmm.
that's barring if those two can stay healthy. So maybe he can get some opportunities, but um, I don't know. I just think that in the NFL, he might not have a defined role.
Hmm.
And that's okay to take like in the fifth round or later, but with your second pick and in the third round, they probably had some better options.
Yeah, and it does make sense. I'll be honest, I don't have the board in front of me, so I don't really realize who was on the board still. But it just seems like a very weird kind of player to take, especially as you said, no real defined role, and you don't see those
Yeah,
guys excel at a
yeah,
huge,
exactly.
huge pace in the NFL. They usually need to have a little bit more definition to what they're doing. Do you remember what happened to the second round pick that the Redskins had? Where did
They
they trade?
had that, and they traded it to the Colts, who the Colts used then to select Michael Pittman.
Why did they trade that to the Colts?
I think that was from last year.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay, so
think it
that
was
was
something
something.
from last year.
That makes sense. That makes sense. All right. So then in the fourth round, we just spoke about the
Hmm.
tackle out of LSU.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of tackles that were on the board that have the potential to actually play in the NFL. Usually, once you
Hmm.
get to the fourth round, you're not really selecting tackles anymore. You're selecting guys that'll become guards or centers.
Right.
How did you feel about this guy at LSU?
He's a really good player. He has the athleticism to play left tackle in the NFL. He's a little underdeveloped technically, but I think first and foremost, when you see a left tackle, they need to be athletic enough to cover speed rushers. He ended up coming down into the fourth round because he had a lot of off the field issues, and that pushes him down. I think that if he didn't have that off the field trouble, he probably gets picked in the middle to early second round.
Oh,
So
wow.
he's got yeah, I mean, character concerns drop, but character concerns have never been an issue for the Redskins. So they were willing to roll the dice there, and I think they took him almost immediately after trading away Trent Williams. So you could see there's a clear strategy going on there.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, again,
Hmm.
he's not going to be a one-to-one replacement. Trent Williams, people might
Right.
have forgotten, was one of the best left tackles in the
Yeah.
league. And then he kind of the Redskins did what they did to him, so it is what it is.
Hmm.
Within the fourth round as well, a couple 40 some odd picks later, it looks like Antonio Gadney Golden, wide
Hmm.
receiver out of Liberty.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know too much about Liberty. I don't know too much about this wide receiver, but usually if you're trying to surround your team with talent,
Hmm.
normally go to some bigger schools. I don't know. What do you know about this guy at Liberty?
Um, Believe it or not, this is actually late for him. A lot of people thought that he would get picked about 40 to 50 spots ahead of this.
Wow.
So he's definitely talented. I think the reason he fell is because he's a big body receiver who doesn't necessarily separate super well. And I think when you look at those, you see that there's like a 50-50 chance really of whether or not they're going to make it in the league.
Mhm.
But I think the most success that you see of that in the NFL is DeAndre Hopkins, who doesn't necessarily separate well, but he just turns 50-50 balls into like 95-5 balls. It's kind of like what Gadney Golden does. He's not, as good at it, but he's a big receiver. They don't have a lot of height on this offense. He can be a really good red zone threat. Probably be some growing pains for him coming into the league, but um, a guy who can snag down those balls is always going to have success. I mean, who was it? Cortland Sutton for
Mhm.
the Broncos. Like that was his big thing was they said he doesn't separate well, but he's going to bring down those 50-50 balls, and he has thrived so far in the NFL. So I think you might be able to see some kind of impact like that with Gadney Golden.
Yeah, I think, hey, if that's again, I'll be honest, I don't watch too much tape, and I definitely
Mhm.
don't watch too much Liberty tape. So I
Yeah.
can't say I know much about him, but I'll lean on you and get that as a good understanding. I mean, as you said, if you can turn those 50-50 balls, even just swing the percentages in your favor in
Hmm.
any sort of fashion, that's going to help a lot. And I think
Yeah.
that's the most important part. And if you can execute that at a high level long enough, you'll be successful in the NFL. And Dwayne Haskins, I just watched a tape of him throwing the other day, and man, he was so accurate in college. But
Mm.
how do you lose accuracy that much? I know the windows are tighter and this, that, and the other
Yeah.
thing, but if you're overthrowing people now by 10 yards, where was that in college? I just don't understand it.
He also had a great offensive line in front of him at Ohio State that was able to really keep him upright. There were only a few teams like Michigan or Penn State who really had defensive lines that can make him feel uncomfortable. And I think that that's, part of the reason why the Redskins, I mean, pressure gets to any quarterback. You'd like to see him handle it a little bit better, but it's pretty obvious, especially when he only started 14 games at Ohio State. It's like not like he has a lot of experience.
Mhm.
Um,
That makes
so,
sense.
yeah.
I just wanted to come to you to defend the Buckeyes. With the last few picks, they picked up
Mhm.
a center out of San Diego State, a linebacker out of Michigan, safety out of Arkansas, and I don't know, some guy in the seventh round. It looks like.
Yeah.
Anybody stick out to you here in some of these positions that we really don't hear too much of, unless they really just kind of screw up or make an incredible play?
I don't know too much about many of these guys that were taken towards the end. The one I do know is Khaleke Hudson, who played at Michigan, so I saw him play quite a bit. He's a decent player. He can probably play like a weak side linebacker or a strong safety, but um, I don't know. When you get towards the end of the draft into these later rounds, you're looking at guys who can just add some quality depth, or maybe for these like skill position guys can be
Mhm.
special teams gunners or aces. So um,
That makes
yeah,
sense. No,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
good. I don't know anything about him. That's why I lean on you. So, in
yeah.
terms of their overall draft, as you said, they were looking for offensive line help. They got a little
Hmm.
bit, but it was relatively late. We'll see what happens with the tackle at LSU if those character concerns rear their ugly head. That seems like a
Yeah,
Jerry Jones pick, so I'm surprised
right.
he didn't snag them earlier. And then yeah, they did grab a couple like one and a half wide receivers, I guess we'll
Hmm.
call it, with
Right.
some of their other picks. So in terms of what they needed to do, it sounds like they did a little bit of it. What about fantasy value? I mean, what do you look at when you're looking at Dwayne Haskins for next season? I mean,
Hmm.
hopefully Darius Geis is healthy. Maybe one
Right.
of these wide receivers will be good. Maybe Terry McLaurin will still do his thing. Who, if anybody, are you really looking at on the Redskins when it comes to fantasy?
I would stick with McLaurin. I think that he showed a lot, and he's got legit 4.3 speed. So
Hmm.
you saw it one of the last games of the season. He took just a quick slant, 75 yards for a touchdown. Um, but looking at this, I don't know. I think a lot of it would be wait and see. Um, do I think Antonio Gibson and this left tackle Shadiq Charles necessarily turned Dwayne Haskins into like a 40 touchdown season? No. So I think that you probably want to kind of wait and see. Maybe Gadney Golden becomes a guy if you have like a really deep draft or something that's like 20 rounds, maybe just a late round flyer on him
Mhm.
if he does become like a red zone threat, like I think he could be.
That's pretty cool. I like
Yeah,
that. Good
yeah,
stuff. So that is the Washington Redskins. We'll move on there. So we're going to the Giants. This one I think we can talk a little bit more in depth about. They were
probably.
the fourth worst team in the league last year with a total of 4 wins. Got rid of Pat Shermer, thank God. So
Yeah,
hopefully we don't just run up the
really happy
middle.
about that.
Hopefully the run up the middle plays just completely got rid of it because we did it enough last year. Brought in
Mhm.
Joe Judge as the head coach, brought in Jason Garrett as
Yeah,
the offensive coordinator, which I'm
yeah.
kind of I don't know. We released Alec Ogletree finally. Eli retired.
Mhm,
Signed James Bradbury, cornerback from the Panthers, and Blake Martinez, linebacker from the Packers. Brought in Dion Lewis, I guess, just
mhm.
to be there. And Marcus Golden's kind of up in the air right now. It's a very confusing situation, so I don't want to explain
Right.
and get it wrong. But going into the draft, I think I know your answer. But what did the Giants need in terms of people and players?
It was clearly all about getting Daniel Jones protection up front, and they clearly did that. I think that the team had more holes than that. So, but I mean, defense. We'll talk about the defense about how just atrocious it's been. But Daniel Jones, we both panned the pick, and I mean,
Hmm.
we totally shit on the pick last year, to be
Hated
honest.
it. I cried.
I I didn't go that far, but I was very depressed. I went to bed a very sad man, and it's he ended up throwing for I think 24 touchdowns, like 3,000 yards through 12 picks, which okay, it's not terrible, but he had 10 fumbles, and it's mostly because his offensive line was so bad. You want to see him maybe get rid of the ball a little bit earlier or develop a little bit better pocket presence,
Hmm.
but a lot of it really just stems from the offensive line.
It was dreadful. So yeah, that was obviously an area of need. And then I would almost say every single position on the defense, every level,
Yeah,
we needed somebody extra there. Maybe
hmm
maybe not interior defensive
defensive line.
lineman,
I
but
know.
other than that, I would have taken literally anyone at any position. So fourth overall, first round, they go Andrew Thomas out
hmm
of Georgia. And I think you said something funny. I don't remember if it was on the last live stream or it was um just in general, but you kind of you loved Andrew Thomas, then you hated Andrew Thomas, then you came back to loving Andrew Thomas again. Tell
Yeah.
me, what was that, I guess, emotional swing and coming back around that you went through there?
It wasn't so much that I loved him then hated him. It was that I really liked him, and then like when the draft came around, you see Trishan Wirfs run like a 4.840. Mekhi Becton runs a low 5. So you're like, whoa, like maybe these guys really are better, and you just like maybe push them off to the side a little bit. But then I kind of came back around to it and saw it was to me it was either Thomas or Jedrick Wills. And I really can't. I'm very happy with the Andrew Thomas pick as a Giants fan. I think that he was a 3-year starter at Georgia. That's obviously a run-heavy team, and this is a team that is probably going to be a run-first team under Joe Judge and with having Saquon. So that was just a great pick. He's a really athletic tackle. He's experienced. He's gone up against great competition, and I think he's walking into a good situation where he'll probably be able to play right tackle first. And once Nate Solder is either dealt or cut, which is probably 1 or 2 years down the road, he moves over to the left side. And he's got the makings of just like a guy that plays on your offensive line for 10 or 12 years.
I hope so, man. I mean, that would be
Yeah,
fantastic. We signed Nate Solder, and I was so ecstatic.
I
Yes,
was
we have a
too. I
left
thought it was a
tackle,
great pick.
and never forget he gave up more sacks than Eric Flowers did.
Yeah.
So it's definitely depressing. It's kind of ridiculous. Justin watched me cry. Thank you, Justin. And then he wanted to know, why did Wirfs fall? Do you have any idea why Tristan Wirfs fell all the way to 13, where he did?
From what I read, is that people got a little too infatuated with his athleticism, and the thing that I read is that his technique apparently he's not great at resetting once he's kind of gone into his back kick.
Hmm.
So defensive ends who can stunt inside, beat him inside on counter moves and stuff like that are going to be tough for him to face. So I don't think Andrew Thomas has that limitation. I mean, he still needs to improve technique. That's how it's going to be for any offensive tackle coming into the league. Um, maybe the only criticism of Thomas is he wanted to get a little bit more power, but
Mhm.
I mean that you're just kind of nitpicking. And
Yeah.
like I said, I think it was between him and Wills, and Gettleman just went with who he thought was better. I think it was a good pick. I was really happy.
I honestly, I wanted anybody on the offensive line. I really wanted Isaiah Simmons just because
Mm,
I thought it would have been fun. And then
yeah.
realizing, well, no, it doesn't really make sense. That's not how you win. You don't win with a really athletic linebacker slash
Mhm.
safety. You win with a good offensive line. So I'm glad they went offensive
Yeah.
line. I didn't really want Becton. I thought
Yeah, he was the one
you
that I
had,
was, like, the most
yeah.
worried that Gettleman would fall in love with, but he
But
stuck to really the safest plan.
and I'm okay with that. And then in the second round, we kind of got a Isaiah Simmons light, if you may. Xavier McKinney, safety out of Alabama. I was surprised he was still on the board.
Yeah.
By 18, people are like, "All right, McKinney's probably coming off soon," and we make it
Mhm.
all the way to 36. He's still there. I read something very interesting. He has played. He was essentially the exact same thing as Isaiah Simmons, just not quite as athletic. And
Yeah.
that's like the only thing. He played 200 snaps at a slot. He played
Mhm.
200 snaps as a cornerback, as a safety, not cornerback. I apologize. As a safety,
Mhm.
as somewhere on the line, he rushed the passer. He did all this stuff too.
Mhm.
He just wasn't a freak when it comes to
Right.
athleticism. So I was pretty happy about that pick. How did you feel about it?
I was so happy. I mean, it was either him or I think I kind of was leaning towards, AJ Epineza from Iowa or
Hmm.
Yetur Gross-Matos from Penn State as, like, a pass rusher, but, safety, it's interesting because they still have Peppers, and I'm not sure how exactly this works. I don't know too much about how the defense is gonna run. Are you gonna have 2 safeties on the field too
Hmm.
much? But Xavier McKinney is, like you were just touching on, is really versatile. He did a lot of what Minkah Fitzpatrick did, which is, he's gonna line up and free safety. He'll come down into the box just as easily, and he can cover in the slot, which is where he would be more comfortable as opposed to trying to cover an outside
Hmm.
receiver. But I think the thing with him was that he's still a good athlete. He's just not quite as athletic, like you said, as Isaiah Simmons or even Minkah Fitzpatrick. So maybe that I don't think that's why he fell. I think that safety is just not ever something isn't really a valued position.
Hmm.
They tend to get pushed down the draft board a little bit. I couldn't believe he was still available, so that's why I was so happy when they took him. And he can even blitz too. So you find somebody that's why, you wanted Isaiah Simmons is because he can do anything on the field. McKinney can't do anything, but he still is really versatile and he can cover up some deficiencies if you use him in creative ways.
And the Giants have a lot of
Yeah,
deficiencies
yes,
on the
they do.
defensive end. So I was pretty excited about that once I read a little bit more about him and kind of who he was and what he did. And
Mhm.
again, if we could get one of the top offensive linemen and then again an Isaiah Simmons light, I was ecstatic
Yeah.
about that. And just a couple more of the picks. The Giants didn't go any skill position, so there's really not too much
Yeah.
we need to talk about there. But Matt Parrott, offensive tackle out of UConn with the
Mhm.
99th overall pick.
Right.
Shane Lemieux, guard out of Oregon, fifth round with 153. I
Yep.
was very happy about both of those. I would have
Yeah.
been honestly okay with them taking offensive tackle at the 36th pick, the second round.
Yeah.
I just wanted as much offensive line help as possible because
That's
again, they
needed.
were so bad.
Yeah.
How much do you know about these two guys coming in? Obviously, one playing right tackle in college, being Matt Parrott.
Mhm.
Shane Lemieux playing guard in Oregon. Both of them played for a significant period of time. Didn't really miss too much time while they were there, which I think is great. What do you know about the two of them?
Pert, I really didn't know much about until they drafted him, and when they were talking about him on ESPN and said that he's 6'7" with 37-inch arms. I was like, "Holy shit, I'm gonna
Mhm.
read about this dude and see, how much potential he has because the physique is already there. That is a prototypical tackle body, and he's athletic too. I mean, he really is. He's able to get lateral. He can move people around. He was a 4-year starter. This is where it gets kind of interesting, is that he still needs to develop his technique a bit, and you would think after 4 years he might be a little bit further advanced. There's
Mhm.
some of what I read said that he needs to be a little bit more receptive to coaching. Hopefully he's, into that because he really has just a ton of potential.
Mhm.
The other thing I read is that he needs to just get more power from his base. So basically, just spend some more time in the weight room. But
Mhm.
he's somebody that I think the coaching staff can really work with. And like we were talking about with Andrew Thomas, there's a good chance that the tackle positions are covered for the next 1 to 2 years. So that gives them some time to work with Pert and coach him up. And hopefully, by the time that Andrew Thomas is ready to man the blind side, Pert can just move right on into a right tackle. So
That would be
I
nice.
really like that. That had a lot of upside. And then Shane Lemieux is somebody that I watched in the Oregon games. I like to stay up for the Pac-12 after dark
After
games.
dark, baby.
Oregon for the past few years has had just really good offensive lines, probably the best in the conference. He started, I think, the last 2 to 2.5 years, and he can probably. I saw that he was doing some drills and working out at center. Which, if
Mhm.
that's if he can do that, then that's perfect. Um,
I agree. We
you
were
know,
terrible at center last season, the last couple seasons.
yeah. So we'll see what happens. Maybe he takes a year to start, but I think that what you see with this third and fifth round pick is that they're clearly investing in the offensive line, and they're okay and they're trusting of their coaching staff to be able to bring these guys along. So yeah,
Well,
it would be pretty awesome.
I'm hoping so, man. I think, again, some of the other picks, Darnay Holmes, cornerback out of
Hmm.
UCLA, fourth round pick, Cameron Brown, linebacker out of Penn State. Giants decided to take all the linebackers once it came to the sixth and seventh round. Carter Coughlin, linebacker, Minnesota. TJ Brunson, linebacker, South Carolina. Tay Crowder, linebacker, Georgia, with a
Right.
cornerback, Chris Williams from Minnesota, again, back in there. I think, so from a skill position and from a fantasy standpoint, none of that is really going to matter too much.
Right.
But I do think investing in the offensive line, that makes Daniel Jones a little bit more coveted. Investing in the
Yeah.
offensive line, that makes Saquon Barkley significantly happier.
Yeah, I mean Saquon's like a weekly starter no matter what, but now you can really hopefully see the offensive line pick up, and you can increase production from him because he dipped a little bit last year, but when he was nicked up, and he also was just the focus of the offense. I mean, you see it all the time, and you can put 7, 8 guys in the box. It's just really tough for running backs to do anything.
It is tough, but it's also the one image I will never ever forget of Saquon Barkley is him teaching his offensive line how to play offensive line, and then the immediate next play he takes it to the house for like 75 yards. That was against the Redskins, I think, in his rookie season,
Yeah,
and it was
yeah,
just ridiculous. He's like he goes into the whole explanation. He's like, if you do this, and then I'll do this, and then it's like the next play they cut to it, and that happens, and he takes it to the house. You're like, if only this guy had an offensive line to play with, how much
yeah,
better would he be? He's still in his first season, had over 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 17 touchdowns. You really don't need more than that, but I think it's possible, and that's the craziest part. So I'm excited.
yeah,
We'll see, man. We will see.
yeah. I think that if he ran behind like what the Cowboys had a couple years ago, he would easily be a 2,000-yard rusher.
It's
He's that
ridiculous, dude.
talented.
It is absolutely ridiculous, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully, the defense. I mean, we got all these linebackers,
Yeah, I mean,
safety, and a couple cornerbacks. Hopefully, the defense is just literally anything is better than last year, so it doesn't matter to me.
I mean, I don't know too much about some of these like last guys that got picked, like T.J. Brunson, Tay Crowder. I read are probably more inside linebackers, which is needed since Ogletree got released.
Mhm.
Chris Williamson from Minnesota, I don't know much about. Most of what I saw said that he probably was going to be an undrafted free agent, but seventh round, who cares? Carter Coughlin, I actually do know a little bit about, seeing that he played in the Big Ten. He was I think a 2 or 3 year starter. He had 10.5 sacks as a senior, so he's a little undersized for a pass rushing linebacker, but the Giants, I think, are sticking with a 3-4. So you need pass rushing linebackers. Maybe he just becomes part of the rotation. I think Cam Brown would probably have a somewhat similar role. Um, these guys you're just kind of hoping might end up making some kind of impact. Maybe you hit on one of them,
Mhm.
or
Exactly.
they provide quality depth, or how, like we were saying before, you just hope maybe they're good special teams players. But they needed to do something. I don't know how many of these guys are difference makers. I will say that I really like the Darnay Holmes pick.
Why?
Well, it was funny. We were talking about this in the group chat with the guys, that he almost picked Ohio State before going to UCLA. So I kind of followed him from high school, and he's just not tall. I mean, I don't even know if he's 5'10". He might be 5'10" in cleats. So he's a little undersized, but he's really athletic, and he breaks on the ball and can make plays on the ball. I think he had 6 or 7 picks last year. So
Whoa.
he's pretty clearly a nickel corner, but again, with how much the NFL likes to spread the ball out now, those guys are so valuable. I think he sticks around and can have an impact on this defense.
I mean, I hope so. Again,
Mhm.
anything is better than last year. We ran pretty
Yeah.
much Janoris Jenkins half
Yeah.
crippled body out there for most of the season until he decided to
Yeah.
use some words that as a society we decided not to use anymore.
Yeah.
And then DeAndre Baker, James Belcher couldn't figure out that maybe we don't put DeAndre Baker on an island by himself because he's going to
Mhm.
just get absolutely torched constantly. I'm
Yeah.
hoping more from him. Valentine, Love. I liked all those
And
picks last
Bradbury,
year. But yeah, and
good
now we bring in
signing.
Brad. We bring in
Mhm.
Bradbury. We have Julius. I always say Julius. Jabril Peppers
Jabril.
is still back there. So adding McKinney, I think we just have. I think it sounds like we're just gonna have like 18 defensive backs on the field at once, and then
Yeah.
maybe just Leonard Williams and hopefully maybe a little Dexter Lawrence as well. But I'm excited. I think
Mhm.
anything will be better than next year. So we
Yeah.
will see. And in terms of fantasy, as we said, Darius Slayton, I think he's going to get a little bit better. I was surprised the Giants didn't take any wide receivers in
Me
the
too.
draft. I thought that was something, even though
Yeah.
it wasn't a huge need. I think Golden Tate is good.
Mhm.
I think Sterling Shepard is above good, like not quite very good, but just like better than
Yeah.
good. And
Mhm.
then you have Darius Slayton, who hopefully again can kind of just be that burner on the outside and just do what he
Right.
did last year.
And if Evan
We'll
Ingram
see.
can stay healthy, he's a great option. The problem is that he
He's
just
never
never is
healthy.
healthy.
Yeah,
So,
he hasn't been healthy at all since he's been a Giant, I feel like. So I would love that, and I think Daniel Jones loved throwing to him when he was
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But if he's not going to be there, there's really not much you can do about it. So hopefully we will see. So I'm excited to see what happens there as well. I think the Giants do a little bit better than 4 wins.
Mhm.
I think it's at 5.5. I think their win total over under is 5.5. I think I'd take the
Mhm.
over, but
I
not by
would too.
much. Not by
Yeah,
much though.
I think 6 or 7 wins is
That's what I'm thinking.
if Daniel Jones can take a step forward this year, then I think 6 or 7 wins is pretty reasonable.
I think that would
But
be. I'd be happy with it.
it was a good draft for them. That's really all you can ask for. Honestly, I think at some point all of their first 5 picks become starters. So
I wouldn't mind that.
that's all you can ask for.
That is really all you can ever ask for in one of these things. Moving on to the Cowboys, they missed the playoffs last year. And I put they criminally underachieved for the amount of talent that they had on the offensive and defensive side. How some games they could score 40 something points against the Rams
Yeah.
and go out against the Eagles and score like 3 or 6 or whatever it was. Like they just made no sense. So obviously fired Jason Garrett. They brought in Mike McCarthy. He already has a Super
Mhm.
Bowl, so we'll see what happens there. Signed Amari Cooper to that gigantic deal, and I don't think Dak is technically signed yet. I don't even
I
think he
don't think
signed
he
his
is either.
franchise tag yet as of recording. They also signed Clinton Dix, Dontari Poe, and Alden Smith, all of
Mhm.
which I think it's just, hey, if we're going to throw a couple $1 million around, whatever, let's throw it on some of these guys. So what did you
Yeah.
see that they needed going into the draft? Oh, and they lost Byron Jones. I apologize.
Right.
I wanted to add that.
Yeah, so corner was definitely going to be a big one for them. Losing Byron Jones was big. Safety was another one. They haven't really had inspiring play from that. And then I think looking at it, they probably could have used some more weapons on the defensive line. Um, and I mean, the signing of Dantari Poe was good, but another defensive tackle I think was needed there. And I don't think they have a great option across from DeMarcus Lawrence. So they really could have used another pass rush option. And I think for the most part, the Cowboys, as much as I hate to say it, they kind of they did some work here and they had a really good draft. So I'm kind of annoyed.
Yeah, it is. It is a little frustrating, and that's why I'm excited we left the Eagles for last. But yeah, I mean, with CeeDee Lamb just dropping to the
Mhm.
Cowboys, that was just that was so frustrating to see. He's so good. The
Yeah.
freaking Raiders, they just had to take Henry Ruggs 12th overall, which made no sense. I had him
Yeah.
I had him the over on 13.5 on him.
Oh,
So
did you really?
lost a couple dollars there. So I was pretty pissed off. But yeah, I mean, just him dropping there, CeeDee Lamb, we talked about him a lot, but how do you think he's going to fit in that offense? And now you have Dak with Zeke coming out of the backfield. You have Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and I guess Blake Jarwin can be on the field all at once. I don't think that's enough. Like you don't have enough people. You have too many people for not enough positions. I mean, what do you
Yeah.
think that offense is going to look like next year?
I think it's going to be really opened up. That's kind of what CeeDee Lamb affords you. That was one of the crazier picks, I think, of the first round. Like, it wasn't a massive reach like what the Raiders did with their 2 picks or anything like that, but they just signed Amari Cooper, and then they just go and take CeeDee Lamb, and it's kind of crazy, but it could be almost like I'm trying to think, like when the Cardinals had Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Bolton, or when the Vikings had Randy Moss and Chris Carter. It's just
Mhm.
like, damn, this could be a really lethal offense. CeeDee Lamb is just incredible. I think I would have probably preferred him over Jerry Jeudy if I could have had my pick.
Mhm.
He just has an incredible talent, and Mike McCarthy is all about scheming guys to get open. It's not like he needs to be schemed to get, he can just get open. And Mike McCarthy takes advantage of guys in space, and there is no better receiver that can operate in space like CeeDee Lamb. I mean, he can turn nothing into a touchdown. So it was, I was shocked to see that they took him. Um, but this offense really becomes absolutely lethal. It just continues to open up the run game for Zeke, who's one of the best running backs in the league. I, they're going to be a team that can probably average over 30, 35 points a game.
That's terrifying. I mean,
Yeah.
thankfully their defense hopefully will then struggle a little bit from it. As you said, they have Demarcus Lawrence. They lost Robert Quinn, who somehow, man, I know he did well last year, but he
Yeah.
got so much money from the Bears. That was
Yeah.
insane, like five
Good
for
for him, man.
seven. Yeah, dude, make all the money you can. I just thought that was such a when I saw that number come across, I was like, that sounds like a lot, but
Yeah, you're
they
like,
did.
whoa, really?
Yeah, like that it was crazy. But they did pick up Trayvon Diggs, cornerback out of
hmm
Alabama. They did pick up Neville Gilmore, defensive tackle
hmm
out of Oklahoma. Reggie Robinson, cornerback out of Tulsa. So they
hmm
did really try and address the defense with their next 4 picks. I guess specifically Trayvon Diggs, and as you said, they are going to need some help when it comes to cornerback. How do you feel? Some people thought he might have been able to go first round. I then
hmm
heard a lot of people were like, he's good, he's not great. How do you feel
Yeah.
about him?
I think the thing is that he's a good athlete. He's just not great. He wasn't as athletic as some of the other guys like Okuda or C.J. Henderson or like even Christian Fulton. So, who I think ended up getting picked even later than
Hmm.
Diggs, which was really surprising. But Diggs falling wasn't too much of a surprise. I think that he's kind of limited in the schemes that he can play. He really plays like a lot of press man coverage where he's strong, but he's just not like incredibly athletic to
Hmm.
turn and run with receivers. But when he can get his hands on guys, he can slow them down and have them play more his speed. So he's a solid pick. Um, it'll be interesting to see if he can really pick up where Byron Jones left off. I mean, he
Hmm.
was a good corner, so Diggs was a good pick. It was a position of need, so can't knock him for it.
They got to do what they got to do.
Mhm.
Defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. I don't know much about him. Hopefully he's bad.
Mhm.
No offense to him or anything. Reggie Robinson, cornerback out of Tulsa. Again, they needed a cornerback. I did see their 4th round pick, 146 overall. The kid from Wisconsin.
Yeah,
I can't say that last name, but
beat
apparently he
Daz.
he was one of the best centers in all of college football last year from an
Yeah,
offensive line that's routinely better than everybody else, and he still doesn't go to the 4th round. That's the thing that confuses me about the NFL draft. This kid's going to come in and start day one. Like, what is
yep.
he doing waiting to the 4th round? I don't get it.
It's weird because center still is just a position that doesn't really get valued all that much, which is really weird because I mean, they're not quite as important as maybe as your left tackle, but they have to call out a lot of protections.
Hmm.
They get the offensive line together, and Biadasz is a really good player. Remington winner for a team that ran for like over 3,000 yards last year, hands down. So, that Zeke is going to be happy about it. He's really good in pass protection too. Um, again, it's probably the thing that I've come to learn about the NFL draft over the last few years is that teams really value athleticism like so much more than anything else. Like, yeah, because every coaching staff, every GM thinks that they're going to be the ones to get the most out of your athletic potential.
Hmm.
So I think that maybe the fact that he just isn't as athletic causes him to drop, but man, the Cowboys, they got a steal there. I mean, like you said, he's going to walk in day one and be the starter now that Travis Frederick retired.
Exactly. Like it's just one of those, it's so confusing to me. Like, and how certain teams always do it. You always see the Steelers. They're always
Hmm.
like, oh, this guy was drafted in the fourth round and he's been a starter for the last 4 years. It's like, well, how does that happen? I just don't get it. And there's just certain teams that do it and certain teams that don't. And maybe Mike McCarthy got in Packers, same thing. Maybe Mike
Hmm.
McCarthy got in Jerry Jones' ears. Like, hey, let's look at this guy because he might be able to start. And a couple other picks. They got Bradley Anae, defensive end out of Utah. So they
Hmm.
did grab someone, but it was relatively late fifth round, 179 overall. And then they grabbed a quarterback just for some fun. Maybe just to press Dak a little bit, just because that's something Jerry Jones would do.
Yeah.
Ben DiNucci, quarterback out of James Madison with the 231st overall pick. So I saw here, wide receiver wasn't a huge need, but man, uh, what is it? Something of riches, embarrassment of riches.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there. Diggs replacing Byron Jones. So I think that's great. As we just said, the kid out of Wisconsin is going to start from day one, especially with Travis Frederick retiring. Then you have here the best draft class in the division.
Yeah.
I thought the Giants did pretty well. I
Hmm.
thought the Redskins did okay, and I thought the Eagles did terribly. But did you think that theirs was it head and shoulders above, or did you think they kind of just eked out maybe the Giants on just a certain things, just the way it felt?
I think that head and shoulders, no, but I think that it is definitely a decent amount better. CeeDee Lamb is going to be a day one starter. Trayvon Diggs is probably going to be a day one starter. I wouldn't be surprised if Neville Gilmore is also. Robinson's probably going to carve out a role pretty early. Be it as we mentioned, is going to be a day one starter. This Bradley Anae I read was supposed to go like third round, and nobody's really sure why he dropped. Utah had a really good defense. They were consistently one of the best front fours in the country. They're like literally right up there with Clemson, Ohio State, Oregon, like those teams that have incredible defensive fronts. Um, I think that he was a really good pick who will at least be a rotational player on the defensive line in pass rush situations. So that's a really good pick that you get late. And then DiNucci, probably just going to be a
Yeah.
quarterback, maybe a practice squad guy. But I think that these first picks that they had all really have good upside and could actually make impacts a little earlier than some of the Giants guys who might be a little bit more developmental.
Yeah, as you said, you think the Giants, their first five picks will become starters at some point, but
Hmm.
you just laid out the four of the first five picks of the Cowboys are starters right now, which
Yeah,
is,
pretty
you're
much.
really, that right there is just kind of shows you what the teams are working with, and obviously kind of how the draft just how it unfolds sometimes and the way
Hmm.
things do shake out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very curious why the gentleman out of Utah did wait so long to go out, but
Hmm.
we will see. I hate the Cowboys just as
Yeah.
much as you, if not a little bit more. So we'll see what happens there. But I think it'll be them and the Eagles fighting for the division, kind of as they have the last few years. So
Probably. Yeah.
we will see there. And then we kind of already touched upon it a little bit, but fantasy implications. I mean, Dak has to
Hmm.
skyrocket to be one of the top five quarterbacks in fantasy this year. I think, especially with
Yeah.
all that firepower around him and a little bit of help on the offensive line.
And he
What do
threw
you
for
think?
5,000 yards last year, which came out of nowhere.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't really see that. And Zeke was still pretty good. Not great. Well,
Hmm.
he was good. He was great, but he wasn't as he has the couple last few years. But at what point, like, how many balls are there, right? Like,
Hmm.
how like when it comes to the wide receivers, Michael Gallup, C.D. Lamb, Amari Cooper. I mean, Amari Cooper is the number one just because he's the number one. But how do you feel about that entire core? And when it comes to fantasy, where are you potentially looking at some of these guys?
I think a lot of you're probably going to end up drafting like the whole offense. It probably hurts Amari Cooper's stock because he's inconsistent despite how talented he
Hmm.
is, and I think that Lamb is just too good. They're different wide receivers. Cooper's a bit more of the precision route runner, whereas Lamb, you can kind of just give him the ball in any way and watch him do his thing. I think that you might see a situation with him where it's almost like when certain teams had like Randy Moss or Terrell Owens. It's just like, okay, twice a quarter, we're gonna throw him deep and just see what happens. And
Hmm.
when something like that, I think that honestly, CeeDee Lamb could even overtake Amari Cooper for the wide receiver one position on that team. So really wouldn't surprise me if Amari Cooper had still a good year, but not like a guy
Mhm.
that you would want to take super early, not if you do keeper leagues. Maybe not a guy you want to keep now. I mean, CeeDee Lamb is going to get force fed the ball. That's just how
And
it is.
and maybe not a guy that if you had the foresight of knowing you get one of the top 2 wide receivers in the draft, you probably wouldn't have given him 4 years, $100 million
Yeah.
with Mr. Jera. I think that is, I don't want to say he's kicking himself because again, they have now probably,
Mhm.
depending on, how CeeDee Lamb shakes out, but they're going to probably have one of the best wide receiving cores
Yeah.
in the league for a couple years at least. But I mean, again, you could use that money elsewhere as we've kind of seen. And he
Right.
probably wishes he signed Dak and franchise tag Amari Cooper so you could
Mhm.
potentially get rid of him now or only have him there for a year so you could free up some of that space. But it is what it is. We will see what happens again. I hope it blows up in their face. So
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. And now this is the fun one. So the Philadelphia Eagles, they made the playoffs last year,
Mhm.
lost to the Seahawks in the wild card round. Unfortunately, Davian Clowney decided to throw his head into Carson Wentz's. Carson Wentz had to take himself out of the game. Pretty unfortunate. I'm never for injuries, but I do hate the Eagles. So it is what it is. Malcolm Jenkins ended up walking away. They did sign Hargraves. If I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, from the Steelers. They released Nigel Bradham, and they traded for Darius Slay, and they also brought in Nickel Roby Coleman of the
Mhm.
infamous St. Louis, I apologize, LA Rams and Saints, New Orleans Saints play that was very, very clearly a
Yeah.
pass interference. I think I can answer this one. The Eagles needed cornerbacks and wide receivers. I
Yep,
think that
that's
was
pretty much it.
easily their biggest needs.
If they just drafted like 4 of each of those, it would have been a perfect draft for them, but of
Yep.
course they couldn't do that, so
No, they couldn't. I know with Jason Peters actually, I think as well is not signed. He hasn't signed anywhere
Mhm.
else, but he's not signed to the Eagles. I think they're content with letting him walk away. He's old. He's injury
Yeah,
prone. He's been
it's
good though. That's the
it
craziest thing.
yeah, but that's why you drafted Lane Johnson was for this inevitability. I think they expected it to happen like 3 years ago, but Lane Johnson probably becomes your left tackle, but now you're left with a hole on the right side, so
Well, didn't they drafted somebody last year? I
oh,
think
yeah, that's right,
maybe
Andre
Justin, if you're
Dillard,
listening.
but
Yeah, Dillard. Okay,
I
yeah.
don't think he was, I don't think he ended up really doing too much last year. I mean, I don't even know how much he started, or how much playing time he actually got, but I don't know if he was ever a guy that
Hmm.
cracked the, depth chart,
Yeah.
but I know the pick was a little, when it happened, so
Hmm.
who knows?
Yeah, we will see. Again,
Mhm,
hopefully it doesn't work. So first round, they took Jalen Rager, wide receiver out of TCU. I know we spoke about him in the mock draft. Can't remember
mhm.
where we had him going. I think we had him going to like the Vikings, if I'm not
The
mistaken.
Saints, I had
The
him going to
Saints.
the Saints.
Okay, so
Yeah,
a little bit later. So you were pretty close on
only a
that
few
one.
picks off, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that one's pretty solid. I mean it's still a wide receiver. You kind of got that part, but what with Jalen Rager, I know one thing you said was he's crazy fast, and he's just
Mhm,
another one of those guys. Just give him the ball, just figure it
yeah,
out. I mean, how do you think he will work in this weird Philadelphia Eagles
mhm.
offense?
It's why I like this pick over them taking Justin Jefferson because they have some slot receivers, and Jefferson probably is going to play like 60 to 70% of his snaps in the slot. So Rieger gives you a legit outside threat, which they don't really have any of. I know that they still have Alshon, but he might be out the door
He's
soon.
yeah, pretty done.
So Rieger has really, I think he's about 6'1", 6'1" and a half. He's got really good speed. Just needs to refine his route running a little bit, because he kind of just would rely on that speed. But you know, Peterson is going to try and give him the ball in some creative ways.
Yeah.
And they're not always going to make him go right down the field. They're probably going to try and work bubble screens in, quick slants. They'll probably try lining him up in different formations to give him like a cleaner release and just
Mhm.
give him the ball. So I like the pick actually. I know it was kind of met with some confusion at first, but I think that it was better than just grabbing another slot. And I'm not saying that Justin Jefferson's just a
Yeah.
slot receiver. I think that Rieger just offers you a little bit more to work with,
Mhm.
if he can just continue to develop into like a true wide receiver.
Mhm. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, again, if he's big enough, you do have written down a little too many drops, which hopefully that
Yeah.
stays with him. But I mean, we'll see, man. I think Doug Peterson. while everyone thought he was a genius, I still think he's smart, but it's very clear John DiFilippo and Frank Reich had a huge, huge
Yeah.
influence, especially on that Super Bowl winning year. I remember you saying you kind of wished we fired Pat Shermer and hired Frank Reich.
Yeah, I
Unfortunately,
really wanted Reich.
we as in the Giants did not do that, and Frank Reich went
Oh
on.
no, it was that they fired Ben McAdoo and hired Pat
Oh, was it
Shermer.
that? Was
That's
it that
what
year? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's what
Oh
pissed me
gosh.
off. I was begging the Giants to make Frank Reich their head coach, and they
Couldn't
went with
do it
the
for you.
blandest head coach they could have.
Well, he's an adult, Derek. He's an
And he's
adult,
gone
and that's
now though.
important. And thank God he is gone. Still paying him for 3 years, I think. So
Yeah,
good for him. But
whatever.
now to the fun part. In the second round,
Are you
in
sure you don't
the
want to save this for last?
okay, you're right. You're right. You're right. All right, we'll move on there. The third round, then
Mhm,
Devon Taylor, linebacker out of Colorado. Okay,
mhm.
that's cool.
Yeah,
Kayvon Wallace, safety out of Clemson.
yeah,
I would have assumed he was going to go a little earlier.
yeah.
I guess he did not, but I mean, you have here they needed him after Malcolm Jenkins left. How do you think
Mhm.
he's going to fit into that defense?
He was a multi-year starter at Clemson, so he's really well coached under Brent Venables. So he's a solid player. He's a pretty good athlete. He can kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none. But
Mhm.
with them losing Malcolm Jenkins, he'll probably get an opportunity to start early. So, I think that he's just a piece that you can add back there. They're not banking on too much in the fourth round, but he's definitely got potential.
Yeah, I mean, coming from Clemson, as I think Justin and I were talking about it last night, just pick more guys from Clemson and Ohio
Yeah.
State and Alabama and Georgia. They routinely get the best recruiting classes, so they're
hmm
all competing against each other. And whoever starts there for 3 years has some sort of talent. So yeah, a fourth
hmm
round flyer can't really hurt on a guy. They grabbed Jack Driscoll, guard out of Auburn. I thought that one was interesting. As you do, I read a little bit of PFF, and they thought he was going to be a very surprise pick, or at least the steal of the draft. How much do you know about Jack Driscoll out of Auburn?
I know a little bit, just from watching some SEC
Hmm.
games, and I like it because I think that, they're a team that does want to run the ball, even though they don't have too many great options. I think Miles Sanders really can be a
Hmm.
potent running back in this league. So, you know, probably has more work to do in pass protection, but Auburn's a team that runs the ball a lot. They run it in creative ways. They ask their guards to be athletic and to be able to pull and kind of hit all different kinds of blocks. So, guy that can do that definitely has value in this league.
Hmm. And then they also picked another offensive tackle out of Auburn, Prince
hmm
Tega Wanago. I
hmm
think Wanagu,
Yeah,
something
that's
like
how you pronounce it.
that.
Again, he's kind of the same thing where he's just a really athletic player, but Auburn's offensive line scheme is really can be tough to come into the league with. We a few
Hmm.
other guys, most notably Greg Robinson, um, Sean
That was a
Coleman, who
while ago.
yeah, but or like Sean Coleman, who got drafted by the Browns a few years ago. They require these really athletic guys, but they're just not too technical when they come
Hmm.
in, and they can struggle. So, again, it's a 6th round pick. You're not really asking for much.
Yeah.
You're hoping maybe that he can just make the team and either become a valuable depth player or a tradable commodity at some point. But with Jason Peters possibly moving
Hmm.
on, you just want to get some guys in there you can work with.
Absolutely, yeah, depth. That's kind of what the Giants are doing when it comes to
hmm
offensive line. So I can't really blame any other team that wants to do that, especially if you're losing a key piece that you've had for a while. They drafted a few other wide receivers: John Hightower
hmm
out of Boise State, Quez Watkins, wide receiver out of Southern Miss. So they hit 3 wide receivers. So
Yeah.
you were close on that 4 wide receiver mark.
Yeah.
Really, nothing in terms of they grabbed the safety, Kevon Wallace, out of Clemson, but no cornerbacks. So I don't know who is going to cover for them next year. I don't know what they're going to want to do there. So hopefully the Giants can take
Yeah.
advantage of that. But I mean, they
Yeah.
drafted.
I mean, with trading for Darius Slay, that alleviates one of them. And uh, Nikel Roby Coleman can play different position or yeah, can do a bunch of
Mhm.
different things at corner. He can play outside, he can play inside. So that definitely alleviated the need to go early for those picks, but I'm just surprised that they didn't go for
Yeah.
it at all. I would have thought that somewhere at the 4th or 5th round, they take a flyer on a guy and be like, all right, let's see what he can do. But
Hmm.
these two wide receivers, John Hightower and Quez Watkins, I honestly don't know too much about.
They're warm bodies at this point, and
Yeah,
that's
it's
what's needed more than anything. I mean, they were so decimated at the position last year. As
yeah.
you already said, Alshon's on his way out, it looks like. If he hasn't started to kick himself out, the Eagles
Hmm.
fans will surely do that. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, yeah, as much as I hate the
Yeah.
Eagles, Carson Wentz throwing for 4,000 yards, but not a single wide receiver receiving over 500 yards
500.
is just a
Yeah.
ridiculous statistic that
Yeah.
got to
It's
give the
almost
guy props.
impossible.
Right, it's insane. I mean, granted, he has two awesome tight ends and then some pass catching
Hmm.
backs, but still, that's just such a crazy number. 500. I mean, Amari Cooper
Yeah.
gets that in like 2.5 games every
Yeah.
season. It seems like, so it's just crazy to me. But here we go. In the second round, the Philadelphia Eagles selected Jalen Hurts, quarterback out of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Jared, I don't think Jared is listening, but you and I were on the call with him, and he went
Yeah.
over Carson Wentz's contract with us many, many times to explain why this doesn't really make sense. So, what do you think about it, Derek?
Um, I honestly think this is one of the worst draft picks I've seen, at least in the second round. I won't go because like there have definitely been some like
Yeah.
first round picks, but as far as second round picks go, this is definitely one of the worst I think I've seen. There was talk that Hurts was going to sneak into the end of the first. I have no idea where the hell that was coming from or what people began to see other than him playing in um, Lincoln Riley's offense,
Hmm.
and that can make anybody look
Yeah.
good. So I don't get it. I mean, he was solid at Alabama, but he also just had incredible wide receivers. It's different from Tua. Like you can't really say, oh well, Tua had great wide receivers. That's true. He also was throwing for 40 touchdowns a year, whereas
Hmm.
Hurts was throwing like 25. And he eventually gets beat out by a kid who's 2 years younger than him. Um, and I think that just really, I mean, that was always the thing with Hurts was that you knew he was a dual threat quarterback who could run the ball, and that's why defenses had to respect his arm. But whenever he played a team like Georgia or LSU, like he struggled to throw the ball because he just wasn't accurate enough. And I don't think him going into Lincoln Riley's system necessarily improved everything. I think that he was just able to show off his athleticism more.
Hmm.
And people when I saw some people saying, well, he could be like a Taysom Hill. And like, no, that's not at all what he's going to be.
Hmm.
He's not running down the field on punt coverage. He's not going to be lining up at wide receiver out wide. That's not how he is. Like,
You
he's a
also don't spend a second round pick on Taysom Hill. Like that's
yeah,
also the other
exactly.
point. Like, what are you
It's
talking about?
it just doesn't make any sense. And I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah today, and they were saying that like, well, maybe you develop him into a good quarterback and he becomes a trade commodity. That's fine if you take a guy who's in the fifth round and turn him into like a third or a second round pick. But the only way that this makes any kind of sense is if you're able to trade him for a pick higher than 54.
Hmm.
That's not likely. Like, I just don't see that happening. Who the hell is going to spend a first round pick to trade for this guy? I mean, and I think that even if he does show improvement, people are probably going to say, well, it's Peterson's system.
Hmm.
He tailored it to him. He made it fit him. He's really not what we're
When is this
looking
guy
for.
even playing though? I
And
mean,
that's,
like
I
I
mean, I,
understand Carson Wentz gets hurt, but that's still such a you don't take an insurance policy with a second round pick. You should have taken potentially Trayvon Diggs at that point or whomever. I think he might actually been
yeah,
off the board, but there were wide receivers on the board. There were cornerbacks still on the board that you could have taken advantage of. Shit, anywhere on the defense as well. It doesn't hurt. Having depth at quarterback is like, I guess it's good,
I
but
mean,
it's not.
if you, let's be honest, their roster isn't like how it was a few years ago where
Mhm.
Foles was able to step in.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but if they think that they're at that point, then they should have signed another backup quarterback who's a veteran, not bank on him. Um, Honestly, I think that the best thing for them to do would have been to wait until the fourth or fifth round and take Jake Fromm. Um, they if they want a guy who is um, potentially able to guide them through a couple of wins if Carson Wentz goes down. Jake Fromm is your guy.
Mhm.
Everybody knows that he has like the mental aspect of it down. He's physically limited, which is why he ended up slipping so much. And he also had his junior year left a bit to be desired, but
Yeah.
for 2 years he balled out, and I just think that he clearly was falling. You could have taken him in the 5th round. He is like the quintessential backup quarterback who can come in and win you a few games. He's not going to go into like,
Hmm.
Kansas City and win you a game, but a home game against like the Redskins, yeah, you're not going to shit your pants and lose that game with the division on the line.
Yeah.
So I just think that all around it was just a bad pick. The player doesn't make a lot of sense. The round and pick doesn't make any sense. It just there are so many more pressing needs than to get a guy who is just a total project. So
Exactly. Like that's the other thing too. Like forget about where they took him. Jalen Hurts isn't good. Like, I mean, I watched a lot of Alabama when he was there, especially that first year was
mhm,
not great. I watched a lot of Oklahoma. I love the Big 12. I watch a lot of Oklahoma. He
yeah,
was good, but
yeah,
everybody looks incredible. They could throw you in Lincoln Riley's system. They could put me there. And I'm sure we throw for 20 touchdowns at least over, a 12-game season. And then, as you said, whenever he faced a real defense, I mean, just look at the Baylor games that they played. He did not look
yeah,
great in those games. Baylor choked away the first one, and then the
mhm,
second one was pretty tight, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
And then they go and play LSU, and they get romped. Now, yes,
yeah,
it's hard when you're down 45-7 or whatever it is, but you should be able to do a little bit more
mhm,
against that type of team. But clearly, he was incapable, and now you want him to play in the NFL, and he's going to be a backup. It's just so confusing to me that
yeah,
they took that pick, and I love every second of it. So I
yeah,
will make sure when I drive around again, I'm going to be putting on Philly Sports Talk Radio just to hear all the crazy, crazy people that love it.
yeah. It's and it was a stunner for sure. I mean, like the CD Lamb pick was a stunner, but like for them in a good way. This
Mhm.
one was just like, whoa,
Yeah,
I don't know what they're thinking here, but
I do love it.
I think that they're going to be regretting it when they, you know, can't cover anybody or can't throw the ball down the field at all. So, I mean, overall, I think that the Eagles might have had one of the worst drafts.
I mean, considering how important a second round pick is to your team, to spend it
Yeah,
on somebody that, in the best case scenario, he doesn't play. That's like the
yeah,
craziest
pretty
part of the pick
much.
is like the best case scenario, he doesn't ever see the field. So why are you spending a second round pick on that? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to do that. The wide receivers that they just passed up on some wide receivers. These guys that they took in the middle and later rounds, you have no idea if those guys are going to
Mhm.
be
Yeah.
sort of viable option. They didn't take any more corners, so I don't know. I just feel like they totally whiffed on like a ton of needs here and reached on some guys, and they're not too far away,
Yeah.
but
They're in the
you
playoffs
know,
last year.
they're in the playoffs last year. They kind of had a chance in that game against the Seahawks, but this is just not one of those drafts where you can say we're better. I think that you look at um, the Redskins got better, maybe marginally, but I still think that they got better. The Giants definitely got better, and the Cowboys really, really got better. So this one kind of was a neutral one for them, and I think that just in a league that's as volatile as the NFL, you can't afford to stay neutral.
Mhm. Oh, wow, that's deep. Write
Hmm,
that one down.
hmm.
I do think, in overall, I think this was fun. Thanks,
Yeah,
Nick and Justin. Nick says Philly was mad that Dallas took CeeDee Lamb, so they took the guy Dallas wanted to spite them. Okay. And Nick thinks that once is made of porcelain, and I completely agree
probably.
with him there. So I guess it makes sense. But again, best case scenario, this guy never touches the field. So
Yeah,
I love it. I'm so happy that everyone hated it. It's absolutely fantastic. I do think now with the extra playoff team, I do think Dallas and the Eagles have the best chance of making the playoffs, especially with that extra slot, the seven seed. Don't think the Giants and Redskins are quite there yet. As I did
yeah.
say, I think 5.5 for the Giants. I would take the over. I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it, but I'd take the over, and we'll see what happens there. I think the Redskins still suck and realize maybe Dwayne Haskins wasn't the right pick, but until then. But yeah, buddy,
Never know.
we'll
Yeah,
see what happens. But thank you so much for doing this. Any last words of wisdom? That last one was pretty great. You might just want to end on that note.
yeah. And I'll just say I'm looking forward to doing the AFC North.
Can't wait. Talk to you soon, man.
All right, take it easy, buddy.